The rain was relentless that night. It hammered the rooftops of the rundown neighborhood, turning sidewalks into shallow rivers. Most people stayed inside, lights dimmed, waiting for the storm to pass. But Jace Walker wasn't most people. He was a single father, a mechanic by trade, and a man used to braving storms, literal and otherwise. He had just locked up the garage, soaked to the bone, when he heard it. A whimper, faint, desperate. Turning toward the alley behind the shop, he spotted a trembling, golden retriever drenched and shivering beside an overturned trash bin. No collar, no tag, just eyes full of fear and rain-slicked fur. Jace hesitated for only a second. Then he knelt, whispering gently, "Hey there, buddy. You lost." The dog didn't run. It leaned into his warmth. That moment, simple, small, and soaked through, would unravel everything Jace thought he knew about his life. Because the owner of that dog wasn't just anyone. She was the last person he ever expected to knock on his door. A billionaire heiress. And the beginning of everything he didn't know he was missing. Jace Walker could rebuild an engine with his eyes closed, but raising a 7-year-old daughter on his own was a whole different blueprint. At 6:15 every morning, before the sun lifted the weight off the rooftops of their aging neighborhood, Jace was already dressed in his grease-smudged coveralls. The air in their 2-room apartment above the auto shop always smelled faintly of motor oil, cinnamon toast, and lavender shampoo, because his daughter Maddie insisted on smelling like a fairy, even if she had breakfast with her knees on a milk crate. "Daddy, if cars can talk, do they dream?" she asked one morning as she swung at her legs at the counter and watching him pour cereal into a chip bowl. Jace paused, box in hand. "Probably. Old ones dream of the road. Fast ones, maybe racing clouds." She grinned, satisfied with his answer. He always had one ready. Not because he knew everything, but because he never wanted Maddie to grow up feeling like she had less wonder, less attention, less love, just because her mother had walked out years ago. Downstairs, the garage lights buzzed to life. The first car of the day was already in queue, its brakes howling like a ghost with unfinished business. Business was slow most weeks, but Jace never turned anyone away, even if they could only pay in fresh tomatoes or a promise to get him next Friday. Maddie ran errands between math problems and helped him find bolts he always misplaced. Together, they made a life stitched together with honesty, long hours, and inside jokes about grumpy carburetors. But that Friday, it was different. The clouds were heavier. The air felt like something was about to shift. By dusk, the sky was bruised purple and slate gray. Thunder rumbled low like a tired engine stalling far away. Jace was locking up the garage when Maddie called out from the window above. "Don't forget your coat." He waved up at her, smiled, then pulled his hood tighter. He liked the rain. It gave the world a chance to quiet down. He was halfway down the alley toward the back entrance when he heard a small, frightened whimper. It wasn't human, but it was close. Instinct took over. Behind a stack of empty crates, beside a dumpster half-eaten by rust, huddled a golden retriever. Its fur was soaked and matted. But the dog didn't growl or run. It just looked up at him. Chest heaving, eyes round and desperate. "No collar," Jace muttered, crouching down slowly. "No one looking for you." He extended his hand. The dog hesitated, then nudged its muzzle into his palm. "Well, that settles it," Jace murmured, gently lifting the dog into his arms. It was heavier than it looked, but he carried engines daily. This one had a heartbeat. Maddie met him at the door. Her eyes widened. "Is it ours?" "No, honey. Just a visitor." But as the dog lay curled up on an old blanket beside the heater, Maddie whispered, "She looks like she needs us." Jace glanced at the dog, then at his daughter. He nodded. Just for the night. He had no idea that dog was the beginning of something neither of them could fix with tools. The storm worsened after nightfall. Rain slapped the windows like hurried knocks, and thunder rolled low and long, shaking the walls of the small apartment above the garage. Jace double-checked the bucket under the leaky spot in the ceiling, then returned to the living room where the dog, drenched only hours ago, was curled up on an old flannel blanket near the space heater. Maddie knelt beside her behind a coloring book forgotten on her lap. "She's still shivering," she whispered, reaching out but stopping just short of touching the retriever. "Can we give her a name?" Jace hesitated, wiping his hands on his jeans. "She might belong to someone. But she's here with us now." He studied the dog. Golden coat, though dulled by dirt. No tag, no chip he had checked. Just wet fur and quiet eyes that followed him like she'd been waiting all her life for someone to say you're safe now. Okay, he finally said, just for tonight, but something temporary. Like, Storm, Storm. Maddie repeated, eyes lighting up, because she came with the rain. Storm blinked slowly, her tail thumping once against the floor. Jace got up and returned with a dish of water and the last of the leftover chicken from dinner. He wasn't sure what dogs were supposed to eat, but judging from the way Storm devoured it, she wasn't picky. They all curled up that night, Jace on the couch, Maddie in her small bed, and Storm at the foot of both the storm outside, slowly losing its fury. The next morning dawned gray but quiet. Jace rose stiffly from the couch blanket, half draped over him, the smell of damp fur lingering in the air. Storm was awake, tail wagging gently when she saw him. Maddie was already in the kitchen pouring cereal with one hand while petting Storm with the other. She's staying right, she asked. Jace sighed, scratching his head. Well, ask around today. Post something on the town board. Maybe someone's missing her. Maddie looked down. But what if no one is just... Jace crouched beside his daughter. Then, maybe she's found where she's supposed to be. They went about their day. Jace taped a flyer in the bakery window, another at the beach station, and asked the mailman. No one recognized the dog. Storm stayed at the shop all afternoon, lying near Maddie while she did homework on an overturned tire. When Jace offered her half a grill's cheese, she took it from his palm without hesitation. He watched her settle back beside his daughter, two strays, maybe one human and one not, but somehow both needing the same thing. He still believed someone might claim her. But part of him, a part that rarely dared to hope, began to wonder, what if this wasn't a mistake? What if she was meant to find them? It was Maddie who noticed it first. She was brushing Storm's fur with the old dog brush Jace had found in a forgotten drawer when her fingers paused. Daddy, look. Jace knelt down beside her, wiping grease from his hands. Around Storm's neck, half hidden beneath dirt and matted fur, was a collar. Not the kind you buy at the local dollar store. This was leather, hand-stitched, monogrammed, and in gold script barely legible under the grime were the initials AV. Jace's brow furrowed. That's not factory made. He unbuckled it gently, examining the back. There was no phone number, no address, just an engraving on the inside. For Storm, always come back to me. The words were too elegant, too personal. Whoever this dog belonged to didn't just love her, they needed her. And if someone had a collar like this custom made, they probably weren't your average neighbor posting flyers on telephone poles. She's not a stray, Maddie whispered. Jace nodded slowly. No, she's not. Back at the garage, Jace placed the collar on the workbench beside a carburetor he'd been meaning to finish. It felt out of place among the wrenches and oil-stained rags. Too refined, too deliberate. He asked around again, more pointedly this time. The postman shrugged. The coffee shop owner raised an eyebrow. No one recognized the initials AV, but more than one person noted the quality. Looks expensive, one said. Like something a celebrity's dog would wear, said another. When Jace returned upstairs, he found Maddie fast asleep beside Storm, the dog curled into the shape of safety. Jace sat on the edge of the couch, collar in hand. He couldn't explain it, but something about that engraving unsettled him. Always come back to me. It wasn't just affection. It was a plea. Whoever owned this dog hadn't just lost her. They were waiting, and tomorrow Jace would start looking for answers. The next morning, the town was quieter than usual. The storm had cleared, leaving puddles and clean air behind. Jace stood outside the garage, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, when a car pulled up to the curb. Not just any car, a sleek silver electric sedan polished to a mirror shine despite the muddy roads. Tinted windows, no local plates. Jace lowered his mug. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She wasn't flashy, not in the way some wealthy people made sure you noticed. But something about her posture, her clothing, understated, tailored, spoke of money. Quiet, generational money. She paused at the edge of the lot, eyes scanning until they landed on the golden retriever sitting just outside the shop, tail thumping. Storm, she breathed. Jace watched as her expression cracked. Behind the elegance was something raw. Grief, hope. 1,000 nights wondering where her dog had gone. He took a cautious step forward. She yours? The woman nodded. Her voice trembled. Yes, her name is Storm. She's mine. Inside the garage, the tension was thick. Maddie clung to Storm, her arms tight around the dog's neck. She doesn't want to go, she whispered, eyes wide with quiet panic. The woman crouched down beside them, careful not to startle the child or the dog. Aurora, she said softly. Aurora Veil. Jace recognized the name immediately. She didn't need to say more. The Veil family name was printed across half the city, from hospitals to theaters to university wings. If someone whispered heiress, it was usually about her. Aurora looked at Storm like she was something sacred. She ran off during the thunder last week. My staff searched everywhere. But she's always come back. Always. Until now. Storm let out a low whine and nuzzled Maddie closer. Aurora's hand hovered, then fell. I didn't think she'd choose someone else. Jace cleared his throat. We didn't steal her, if that's what. No. Aurora looked up, eyes glassy. You saved her. A silence settled over them all. Complicated. Tender. I think she said, voice barely above a whisper. Storm knew exactly where to go. Aurora stood in the doorway of Jace's modest home, her designer heels just brushing the old welcome mat. The scent of motor oil and warm soup lingered in the air, strangely comforting. Storm lay curled on the rug, tail wagging lazily. Maddie sat beside her, crayon in hand, drawing 3 figures beneath a sun. Aurora's gaze swept the room, landing on the dish of clean water by the fridge and the faded blanket draped over Storm's sleeping body. You washed her, she asked softly. Jace nodded. Best we could. She let Maddie brush her out. Aurora blinked fast, trying to contain something behind her lashes. My staff wouldn't go near her when she was wet. Too much of a mess. She's always been mine, but not really theirs. She crouched, brushing her fingers over Storm's fur. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into her touch, then looked over at Jace. She never trusted strangers, Aurora murmured. But she trusts you. Jace shrugged. Dogs know people. Aurora smiled faintly. Apparently better than people know people. Jace poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. Aurora accepted hers with a quiet nod. She sat at the worn kitchen table, glancing around like she hadn't sat in a real home in years. She was my father's dog, she said after a long silence. He gave her to me the day he was diagnosed. Said she'd keep me grounded. Jace said nothing, just listened. He passed last winter. Aurora added. Everyone else, friends, family, they moved on. But Storm stayed. She didn't ask questions. She didn't expect me to smile. Her voice cracked then, and she quickly sipped from her mug. Jace leaned forward slightly. She's a good listener. Aurora met his eyes. You didn't know who she belonged to. You didn't ask for anything. And still you fed her. Let her sleep inside. You would done the same, Jace said. Aurora looked away. No, she whispered. I don't think I would have. For a long moment, the quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was shared. 2 people sitting at a table, recognizing something they hadn't expected, grief and the ways it softened when someone simply stayed. The next morning, Jace heard the hum of a quiet engine outside his home just as he was packing Maddie's lunch. He glanced through the window. Same car, same woman, Aurora Veil. But this time she wasn't alone. She stepped out of the car in flats and jeans, casual but unmistakably refined. From the trunk, she pulled out 2 neatly packed bags. One with the logo of a boutique children's store downtown. The other marked with the name of a local bookstore Jace had never stepped foot in. Jace opened the door before she could knock. You didn't have to do that. I know, Aurora replied, her tone calm but firm. That's exactly why I wanted to. Maddie peeked out from behind Jace, eyes wide. When she saw the familiar dog tail wagging beside Aurora's legs, she ran forward. Storm came back. Aurora smiled. She insisted. Jace watched, uncertain, as Aurora knelt beside Maddie and opened the bag from the bookstore. I didn't know what she liked, she said, so I asked the clerk what kids who ask big questions like. He gave me this. She handed Maddie a book titled The Girl Who Asked the Moon. Maddie beamed. I love stars. Aurora turned to Jace next. I know this may feel intrusive, but when you gave Storm a place to rest, you gave me something I didn't know I needed: time to hope again. I don't have much that's useful, but I do have resources. Jace crossed his arms. I didn't help Storm to get something out of it. I know, Aurora's voice softened, but maybe this isn't repayment. Maybe it's just kindness passed back. Jace hesitated. Then slowly he nodded. All right, he said, but no more gift bags. Aurora grinned. Just books, then. From the rug, Storm let out a happy huff, the sound of something settling into place. It started with crayons. Aurora had barely stepped inside when Maddie tugged at her hand and pulled her toward the living room floor, where paper and colored pencils waited. "You can help me with the sky," Maddie instructed, already assigning her roles like she'd always been there. Aurora laughed softly, a little surprised by herself. She folded her legs beneath her and picked up a pencil. "Do I need to know anything special about this sky?" Maddie tilted her head, serious. "Yes. It's not just blue. It's purple when you're thinking and orange when you're brave." Aurora's hand paused on the page. Her throat tightened at the child's logic, so wildly innocent and honest it ached. "Then I guess I've been drawing the sky wrong my whole life," Maddie smiled. "It's okay. He'll teach you." And she did. For the next hour, Jace listened from the kitchen as Aurora's crisp elegance softened into warm laughter, her voice threading into the home like sunlight. Later that evening, as Maddie napped on the couch with Storm curled around her, Aurora stood near the window, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "She reminds me of me," she said suddenly, "when I was her age. Curious, unfiltered, always coloring outside the lines." Jace glanced over, drying his hands on a towel. "You forget how much we lose when we grow up." Aurora nodded, eyes still on the child. "When my mother died, my father became everything. But he was formal, kind but structured. I learned early how to be quiet. Maddie doesn't have that filter." "No," Jace agreed, chuckling. "She'll ask a stranger why they look sad, or tell you your shoes don't match." "She told me my earrings look like tiny spaceships," Aurora said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And somehow I wanted to believe her. Jace said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only way to let someone feel safe enough to keep going. "She's healing something I didn't know was broken," Aurora whispered. "Or maybe something I was afraid would never come back." The kitchen was warm with the scent of something slightly over-roasted, Jace's coffee, as usual, a little stronger than necessary. Aurora sat at the small table, fingers wrapped around the chipped mug he handed her, mismatched to her polished nails and designer coat draped over the chair. "I should warn you," Jace said, pouring his own cup. "This isn't fancy. No oat milk, no cinnamon foam, just coffee." Aurora took a sip, blinked. "It's terrible." He laughed. "Honesty, refreshing." She smiled, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I'm just not used to things being so real." Jace leaned back. "Real's all I've got." For a moment, Aurora didn't respond. She just sat there, the rim of the mug pressed to her lips, as if absorbing what that meant. In this small, cluttered kitchen with no catering service, no marble countertops, no staff, she felt oddly unguarded. She hadn't known how exhausting perfection was until she stepped into imperfection. "So what do you do?" Jace asked casually over the rim of his mug. Aurora froze. She could tell him the truth about the Veil legacy, the conglomerate her family ran, the boardrooms and private jets. But in this quiet place with a grease-stained calendar on the fridge and a little girl asleep in the next room, the truth felt like a wall. "I do. Logistics," she said carefully. "Kind of like coordinating people and resources." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Sounds important," Aurora shrugged. "Mostly it's about knowing who needs what and making sure they get it." "You any good at it?" She gave a small, honest laugh. "Some days." And that was it. No fanfare, no unveiling, just two people sipping awful coffee, not needing to impress. Aurora hadn't lied, not really. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to be seen. She just wanted to be. And Jace, unaware of the name behind the woman across the table, simply liked her company. Aurora didn't mean to follow him. Not really. She had just lingered. After coffee, after Maddie hugged her goodbye with a drawing tucked into her coat pocket, she watched Jace head down the street with a toolbox in hand, nodding to neighbors as he went. Curiosity tugged harder than decorum. So she drove the long way around the block and parked discreetly, sliding sunglasses over her face like they'd hide the truth from anyone who looked too closely. She watched him patch up a widow's porch railing, then fix a shorted-out outlet for a young couple with a baby. He didn't ask for anything. No payment, not even thanks. Just a tired smile and a glad to help. Aurora didn't understand it, not fully, but she felt it deep in her chest, a kind of kindness that didn't advertise itself. And somewhere between the second porch and third house call, she realized she didn't feel like a guest anymore. Jace noticed it first when old Mr. Contreras leaned over his fence and said, "Hey, Casanova, you dating that woman with the spaceship car?" He blinked. "What? You know the one with the hair and the shoes? Looks like she walked out of a magazine ad for Rich Guild." Jace rubbed his neck. "She's just a friend. We'll tell your friend that half the block's wondering why a billionaire heiress is slumming it on our end of town." The words hung in the air like smoke. Billionaire. Heiress. Jace's brow furrowed. "You mean Aurora, that's her name, huh? Fancy. My niece Googled her. Aurora Veil. As in Veil Industries. She's on magazines and charity boards and probably owns half the buildings downtown." Jace's heart thudded. He remembered the careful vagueness, the perfectly manicured calm, the quiet sadness. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she brought coloring books and soup. Mr. Contreras gave him a look. "And you think that means she ain't rich, no?" Jace said slowly. "I think it means she's human." Jace didn't bring it up at first, not when Aurora returned with another batch of supplies. Not even when Maddie asked her innocently, "Do you live in a castle?" But that evening, after Maddie went to bed and Aurora sat quietly at the kitchen table, bare-faced, relaxed human, Jace finally said it. "Veil. Aurora Veil." She looked up slowly, hands pausing over her tea. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you," she admitted. "You seemed to like me before you knew." He didn't speak, just nodded once. A short breath passed between them. "You own buildings?" he said quietly. "My family does. I inherit the pressure," she replied, voice small. "But that's not all I am." Jace stood. He couldn't sit anymore. "You could have said something. I didn't want to be that version of me around you." Silence again, the kind that fills the corners of the room and makes the air too thick. And then softly, "I'm sorry, Jace." He didn't look at her. "You don't have to be sorry. You just have to be honest." The next few days were different. Aurora still came by, but less often. Maddie noticed first, asking when her shiny friend would visit again. Jace didn't know what to say. He just smiled and ruffled her hair. Inside, though, he was pulling back. Not with anger, just caution. Like a man who'd realized the stars were closer than he thought, but still too far to touch. He saw her car once at the corner idling. She didn't get out. They were too different, weren't they? She belonged to a world of boardrooms and headlines. He fixed cars that coughed up smoke and prayed every Friday night that rent would somehow make itself pay. And yet some part of him still waited, listened, hoped. Because even when she wasn't there, her warmth remained. Chapter 21, The Confession. Aurora stood at Jace's door again, not with shopping bags or baked goods, but with nothing in her hands. Just a quiet look in her eyes. He hesitated before letting her in. They sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where truths had first started to slip between them. Maddie was at school. The silence was uninterrupted, raw. "I didn't lie to hurt you," Aurora said, voice calm but trembling at the edges. "I just didn't know how to explain the difference between what I own and what I feel." Jace looked down at his calloused hands. "So explain it now." She took a breath. "When my father died, he left me everything. His name, his business, his dog. But he also left behind expectations I didn't ask for. I spent years at galas and boardrooms pretending I had purpose." She met his gaze. "Until that storm. Until I saw you shelter my dog with no idea who she belonged to. No calculation, no second thought. And then your daughter hugged me like I mattered, not because of my name, but because I smiled." Jace was quiet, listening, really listening. "I haven't felt like myself in years," Aurora whispered. "But with you and with her, I started to remember." Jace leaned back in his chair, jaw tense. "I'm a mechanic, Aurora, a single dad scraping by. You talk about remembering who you are." "You showed me," she interrupted gently. "I'm not some lesson," he replied, voice firmer now. "I don't want to be your reset button or your temporary anchor." Aurora stood slowly. "You're not," she said. "You're the first real thing that's happened to me in a very long time." She reached into her coat and pulled out Maddie's drawing, the one with the bomb and the sun, and the three of them holding hands. "She gave this to me. I keep it in my desk drawer," Aurora said. "Not because it's cute, but because every time I look at it, I remember what matters." Then she turned to leave, but just before stepping through the door, she paused. "Well, stop coming if you want, but I won't stop hoping." The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and oddly heavy. Maddie tore it open with eager fingers while Jace looked on wary. Inside was a gold embossed card. Aurora Veil cordially invites you to the Veil Foundation Winter Gala. Dress code, formal. Location, the Grand Meridian. A handwritten note in the corner read, "Please come both of you. I'd like them to see what real kindness looks like." Jace hesitated. "It's not our world." Maddie grinned toothy and bright. "Can I wear the sparkly dress from Aunt Rosie's wedding?" Jace exhaled. "Guess we're going." The Grand Meridian glittered like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers hung like upside-down stars. People in suits and gowns floated past with flutes of champagne and polished smiles. Jace stood awkwardly by the entrance, adjusting his tie. Maddie clutched his hand in her thrift store dress, her curls pinned back with barrettes Claire had lent them. Then they walked in. Heads turned. Whispers bloomed like frost in their wake. "Whoosie, did she bring a mechanic? Look at the little girl's dress. How quaint." Aurora spotted them from across the room. Her eyes lit up. Up relief joy, something stronger. But Jace felt the weight of every glance, every judgment. His shoulders stiffened. He leaned down to Maddie and whispered, maybe this was a mistake. But before they could turn, Aurora arrived at his side. "I'm glad you came," she said, voice clear, eyes only for them. Then she looked at the roomette, the sneers and fake smiles, and added louder, "This is the man who saved my family, and the girl who reminded me how to feel." Silence fell like a curtain, and for the first time that night, Jace straightened his shoulders, not for them, but for her. And for the little girl who squeezed his hand tighter. The ballroom shimmered with laughter and crystal light. Jace gripped Maddie's hand as they moved through the crowd, but the sea of gowns and tuxedos surged like waves, and in an instant, her small fingers slipped from his. He turned. She was gone. A flash of panic lit his chest. He scanned the room, chandeliers glittering above strangers swirling around him, faces unfamiliar, and too many. "Maddie," he called out, voice cracking, but the music swallowed the sound. He pushed through clusters of people, eyes sharp now, jaw clenched. No one noticed. No one cared. Except Aurora. She didn't hear him call, but something in her heart tugged sharply. She excused herself from a conversation and moved instinctively through the room. It was near the side corridor beside a velvet-draped alcove that she found her. Maddie sat curled on the carpet, knees to her chest, wiping at tears. "I wanted to find the dessert table," she whispered, but then everything looked the same. Aurora crouched slowly, not touching yet. "You're safe now. I've got you." Big eyes looked up. "You came for me," Aurora nodded, her own throat tightening. "Always." She pulled Maddie into her arms and carried her back, not because the child couldn't walk, but because sometimes we all need to be held. Jace saw them before they saw him. Aurora kneeling in her gown, arms wrapped tightly around Maddie, whispering something soft. She wasn't the woman from the headlines. Not the heiress with the estate and legacy. She was just someone who cared. Her eyes lifted and met his. For a moment, neither spoke. But something passed between them, not polished or grand, but honest. She stood slowly still, holding Maddie's hand. "She's okay," Aurora said gently, voice trembling slightly. "I just found her by the side hall. I think she was looking for cake." Jace nodded. His voice caught. "Thank you." Later, when the crowd had thinned and the music softened, Jace stepped outside for air. The cold bit at his sleeves, but he didn't move. Aurora joined him, wordless at first. He glanced over. "You ever feel like you're just pretending to belong?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at the stars, distant, quiet. "All the time," she said. Jace studied her profile. No jewels now, no fanfare, just wind tousling her hair. For the first time, he didn't see the billionaire. He saw someone grieving someone, trying someone real. And for the first time, he let himself wonder, what if they weren't so different after all? No gala gowns, no photographers, no headlines, just sneakers crunching on gravel as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in amber and gold. Jace walked slowly, leash in hand, the golden retriever trotting ahead with its tail wagging like a metronome of peace. Maddie skipped beside him, one hand in Aurora's, the other cradling a half-blown dandelion puff like it held a secret wish. They didn't say much, didn't need to. There was a rhythm to the quiet, unspoken, unforced. The kind of silence that didn't demand to be filled. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. As they reached the edge of the park, the dog paused to sniff a tree, and Maddie chased after a butterfly. Jace glanced sideways. Aurora met his gaze. No walls, no armor, just tired eyes soft around the edges. I don't think I've laughed like that in years, she said quietly. Me neither, Jace admitted. They stood there a while, just watching the girl in the bog in the golden light. He didn't reach for her hand, she didn't lean in, but they didn't walk away either. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was just the beginning of something real. They never made the news. There were no flashing cameras, no viral moments, no headlines screaming about the billionaire heiress and the single dad. Just quiet mornings filled with pancakes and paw prints, walks at sunset, laughter that didn't ask permission, and love the kind that grows not in grand gestures, but in showing up every single day. Aurora didn't find purpose in a boardroom. She found it in Maddie's drawings on the fridge, in Jace's steady hand fixing what was broken, not just in machines, but in hearts. And Jace, he didn't save the dog that night to impress anyone. He just did what he always did, what was kind, what was right. Turns out kindness was enough. It always was.